Hi, Stacy.
Hi.
I'm so happy to have you here. So
Thanks for
I'm,
having me.
yeah, I'm thinking of you as the real everything because that's you.
That's true.
So what is the real everything and how are you the real everything and what does it mean to you? And give us that little bio.
I don't know that I would call myself the real everything, but I like to incorporate into my sharing and education everything real, if that makes sense. So I started out with a passion for clean eating and living. I was a new mom and I got caught up in specifically paleo, but in this idea of food having an impact on our health and wellness beyond just calorie counting and fat, which is what I had grown up with. I am someone who exists in a larger body my whole life. I went to fat camp and was taught, you know, fat free is the solution to all of my
Mm,
problems. And so I carried a lot of that diet culture into the early part of my overall wellness journey, so to speak, and wrote three best-selling cookbooks, and then realized that community wasn't one that I really wanted to align with.
mm,
Especially through COVID, there was a lot of pseudoscience and things about the wellness community that I was in that made me feel really uncomfortable. So my brand has been expanding for over a decade now into non-toxic living, and that includes both healthy inside and out. So when I talk about that, I am a certified uh, trauma foster parent. I am literally licensed to parent through therapeutic practices and have adopted a complex PTSD child. I have an autistic child. I'm married to a neurodivergent spouse. So I incorporate a lot of the different things that work in our lives, not just, trying to reduce the hyper palatable, hyper processed foods. That doesn't mean that they don't exist in our lives. They do, but we feel better when they're not in our lives. And so, how do we incorporate that in a way that is not dogmatic, judgmental, and all of those things so that we can feel our best? And I talk about that from skincare. I talk about that from mental health. I talk about all of the things that impact our wellness because I think that there are a lot of people out there that still believe, oh, if I just X hard enough, right? Like whether that's if I just exercise enough, if I just clean eat enough, if I just do this thing enough, then all of the puzzle pieces will fall into place and my life will be wonderful. And frankly, there's no such thing as perfect. And so my goal is just to be real and transparent and authentic and sharing both the struggles and the wins that our family has. And so there's just a whole lot of everything,
wow.
hence real
Wow.
everything.
That is real everything. Okay, I want to dissect so much of this. Can we start with fat camp?
Of course.
How old were you when you went to fat camp? Did you want to go? Did your family want you to go? How did you end up there?
I went the summer of seventh and eighth grade. So like a rising freshman into high school. My parents were divorced. I'm not sure which one. I think they both wanted me to go, but I know that the one with money paid for it
Yeah.
because it's quite expensive back then, and I think still today. I went to Camp Shane, which is like the most famous one, and I believe that that's where both my mental and physical health was really broken. I participated in the documentary podcast Camp Shame. So people are welcome to go listen to that series. I also have a couple of episodes on my podcast, Real Talk Whole Life, where we talked more about my story specifically. But I think overall, that's where I learned bulimia. That's where I had my first sexual assault. That's where I broke my metabolism so bad that I could never function again in a moderate body, which is what I went into. And I also got bronchitis and was denied because they thought that I was faking not wanting to exercise. So it ended up breaking a rib with pneumonia before I actually got to see a doctor. So there was just a whole lot of
God.
not goodness at
But you
Camp
went
Shea.
2 years in a row,
I
2 years in
did.
a row. Was it horrible year one and and you just like were forced to go back? How come you went
So
back?
I was so young, and I think there's so much trauma around it that I'm not exactly sure, but I'm pretty sure what happened is I had to leave early the first year because I got sick.
Mm.
And so there was some sort of like credit or rebate for me to go back the second year. Yeah.
Oh
But
my gosh.
they all of these camps, they're I encourage listeners to go look up the Minnesota starvation diet study, which was done on healthy men back in, I think it was World War II time. And they essentially did to those men what would happen to a growing bodied teenager in fat camp. And the results are so disturbing, so astounding. They took all of these really healthy men, both physically and emotionally, and they were all completely broken at the end. And so when we talk about a starvation diet as a means to health, I need people to learn that those two things are absolutely not the same. That when we sacrifice nourishing our body and taking care of our body for the sake of aesthetics, let's call it what it is and not like
Not a
health.
healthful, right, not a
No,
healthful
there was
response.
nothing healthy about what happened to me those summers. And my body was smaller and I was treated with such adoration coming out of the camp. But of course, it's impossible to exercise like 9 hours a day when you're in school and at home. And so no matter what you do, you're going to gain the weight back. And then the camp welcomes you back for their $10,000 or whatever it was back
Wow.
then, to come back and lose weight again and again on a yo-yo cycle.
Where did you grow up? Where was this taking place?
That Camp Shane. Camp Shame is the name of the documentary podcast. Camp Shane is in the like Catskills in New
Okay.
York, but I grew up in Virginia.
Okay.
So my parents lived in two different parts of Virginia, but Virginia.
Okay. So you come back to high school after this experience and your mental health is broken. How did you manage high school? I mean, high school's hard enough when you're not also handling sexual assault, body image issues, which we all handle in that phase of life, but like, was it so hard immediately? Or were
I think
you like, what kind of place were you in?
I think it's been hard my whole life. I think that there's, a lot of my life that I can point to, and there's a lot of different reasons for different things. But in high school, for sure, no matter what I did, I was still going to exist in a larger body. Like it's
Mhm.
genetic. Even when I was a competitive athlete after I had children, and I was still in a larger body. Like that's just what my body composition looks like.
Mhm.
Um, and so even after going to fat camp and starting ninth grade, I still was like on the cusp of plus size clothes. I
Mhm.
remember I was a size 12, 14. Um, and so it's not like I had this life changing, experience that made it easier for me when I was smaller bodied. And then I transitioned to like, I just have always been, but I am also the kind of person, fortunately, that people gravitate towards. And so I had a lot of friends, and the people who didn't want to be my friends, they didn't need to be my friends. And if people wanted to make fun of me, I would have sharp things to say back at them that would
Yeah.
make them not want to say something again.
Mhm.
Um, I also grew up in the age of I'm a Zennial, which means that like the internet was being invented when I was in high school.
Mhm.
And so I did a lot of really unsafe internet dating at the time,
Mm.
ASL through AOL, for those who are
Oh,
old enough.
wow.
Yeah. Um, and I'm lucky that I didn't have more problems than I did. I did end up having two other sexual assault experiences in my high school time. And one of the things that I talk about in the Camp Shame documentary is when you've been shamed your whole life into believing that your body is unworthy and disgusting and ugly, then when someone takes advantage of you, you are under the impression, and this was directly said to me by one of the people, like, no one would believe that I would do that to you, that I would be interested in you. So go
Mm,
ahead and tell people. And we've seen that happen in modern day giant political cases where something very similar has been said. Oh, I wasn't attracted to her. And the fact is that we need to start accepting and respecting all bodies in order for everyone to be safe, because people who are already in smaller bodies feel like they need to get smaller in order to not be perceived as in a larger body. We're talking about things like eating disorders. If there was not the worry of shame in a larger body, most of that would not exist.
mm,
And so we're looking at a lot of different things in our societal perspective that are all rooted in this idea that culturally we believe that larger bodies are bad.
mm,
And my goal is to help people understand that you can take care of yourself and you can be healthy in a lot of different bodies, and that's okay. And if we learn to accept ourselves, that's the first step in starting to love and accept everybody else.
mm. I love that. How did you, and it might still be a work in progress, how did you feel about your parents in terms of them wanting you to go to this camp? And I guess through high school, through your 20s, I mean, did you have issues with what they thought they wanted from you? Because it sounds like you worked really hard on the self-acceptance, but I think I'm hearing if it were me, like if my parents were like, well, you need to go to fat camp, girl. And, I would be like, F you. Like, I'm good. You know what I mean? So, how has that piece of the relationship played out for you guys?
I have a really great relationship with my father, but it was not always that way. I think he's done also a lot of growth. And it's funny, I've been talking with friends lately, and this phrase keeps coming up in conversation, which is like, I don't think that you can call yourself maturing. I don't think that you really are aging with grace and gaining wisdom if you aren't actually changing who you are along the way, right? And so I think we all need to challenge ourselves. Do we believe the same things that we did 10 years ago, 20 years ago? Because if we do, then I don't really think that we're having the growth that comes with what we like to call aging, right? Wisdom and all of these kinds of things. And so I see a lot of that in my father, and he is someone who I have a lot of respect for. And he and I have had a lot of different discussions, and not all of them have been great, but all of them have been healing for both of us. I think to talk about not just that, but different parts of we all have something that happened with our parents that
Of
didn't make us feel
course.
great, right?
Right.
And so, in having a conversation about that, it really starts to break down the walls that you might put up in that relationship and then helps heal. I unfortunately do not have the same relationship with my mom. She is not someone who wants to improve and grow as a person. She had some trauma in her youth and is kind of stuck there. And I have to learn to accept that that's where she is and that I can't change her. And all I can do is worry about myself. And I think whether I had gone to at camp or not, that would have been the same situation, right?
Yeah.
Like we all have a lot of complications in parenting, and I was bulimic in high school for several years. I did tell my mom, and because I was in a larger body, she told me she didn't believe me, that it wasn't true.
Mm,
So there's just a lot of different things that come up for parent-child relationships, and I think one of the other things that I do to try to heal that relationship that I have with my parents is try to be the best parent that I can for my children, and
mhm.
also own and acknowledge and accept when I don't do something right. And one of the big things that I find really important in parenting is acknowledging that and apologizing and being human, right? I
Yeah.
think for those of us that at least are my generation or older, our parents were under the impression that they needed to be perfect, and they never showed vulnerability. They never apologized. They never, had that sort of thing. And so we thought they walked on water. I don't know about you, but I thought like my parents had this like vault of wealth somewhere.
Yeah.
And like when, you reach a certain age, magically just
Yes.
everything,
Right.
all of the knowledge of the world is just in your
Hmm.
brain and you're an adult and you have it all together. Um, And so I don't want my children to believe that. I don't want them to hit 18 and feel like a failure because they don't feel that way. I want them to know that adulthood is a process of learning. Like everything in life is a process of learning. I'm doing my best and they're doing their best. And each of us are going to make mistakes. And that's okay because it comes from a place of love. As long as we tell each other, like, I'm sorry, I lost my cool. I
Yeah.
did not mean to lose my temper. What I was trying to say is this. I'm sorry that I came across in a hurtful way. And that to me has been the biggest thing with repairing my relationship, I think, with my parents is learning that like they didn't have the gift of the kind of growth that we have
Yeah.
in, modern day parenting. Um, and they did the best that they could. And now that we're both adults, if we can have those rational conversations where we can own that we were each doing the best that we thought we could, what else could we want,
Right.
from a loving relationship?
For sure. How does body image manifest in your home? What, in terms of your parenting and all you've learned about your own body image, how do you keep that dialogue open in your house with your children?
That's a
Four,
great
you have
question.
four children,
I
right? And
do. I do.
okay.
And I'm going to be honest, it's really hard, especially when I have those thoughts of shame that I'm fighting about my own body still,
Mm,
right? Like, although I've done a lot of healing, it doesn't mean that sometimes I don't look in the mirror and still have those thoughts and need to tell myself, like, that's not true. Those are the stories you're telling yourself, like, those kinds of things. And so I try to talk about health and wellness from the perspective of, like, for example, my youngest who has autism is very impulsive. He has ADHD and autism and just like incredibly impulsive. And so if there's anything in the house that tastes delicious, he has a really hard time not consuming all of it. And so, we talk about like, let's look at the serving size. This is what the bag says is a serving size. Are you having a serving or are you having more than a serving? And if you're having more than a serving, maybe your body is telling you that it's hungry. What is a good thing to do to nourish yourself if your body is hungry? And trying to use those kinds of words and
mm,
terms. I think also one of my children struggles with, well, two of my children struggle with mental health. I told you one has complex PTSD
yeah.
and um, was adopted, and when they came to us had disordered eating, and we've worked with professionals about that, not just in-house
Yeah.
toughing it out.
Right.
That's one thing. And then I have another child who struggles with mental health from the perspective of depression,
Mm,
who also sees a professional. And while we tried to help as much as we could when he was younger with lifestyle factors, he needs medication,
yeah.
and that's what he needs to feel his best. And honestly, I see it in his body when he's not feeling his best. And I wish that that was something that people knew enough to tell me about when I was younger, because I was definitely eating my feelings. I did not have a good relationship with my mom. I had some significant trauma that I was dealing with through bulimia, which is really about control. It's not
Mm,
really about your body. And so I want to empower my children so they feel like they're in control of their lives and their decisions. I want to help them know that if they need help, that not just me, but we will make sure that they get the support they need, whether it's from a registered dietitian or from a medical professional therapist, like whatever the case may
mhm.
be.
Amazing. And so, can we talk about your cookbooks?
Yeah.
How did they get? I mean, I'm just, I admire that you were still and are still dealing with this lifelong issue of body size and body image. And you were like, you know what? I'm going to write a cookbook and then I'm going to write two more. How did this
Well,
come to be?
I thought for sure I had it figured out.
Yeah.
I go back and I look at those social posts, and there's a lot of gravitas
Yeah.
thinking I had it all figured out. I had toddlers. I didn't have teenagers.
Hmm.
So just for anybody out there who is feeling that way, FYI, you're gonna have a little awakening in about a decade.
Yes.
Um, and so those books were written from the perspective of really thinking that I had solved it all, and
Hmm.
um, not really taking into consideration the harm that I was causing by being overly restrictive to my children and not really understanding the impact that that would have as they grew up. and could make their own choices. I mean, we talked about my son who's impulsive, but all of the teenagers, the minute that they could go to friends' houses without supervision, it was like a free for all. They had
Mhm.
no control over things because it was like, oh, that's restricted for me. Therefore, I need all of it when I have access,
Mhm.
rather than learning to listen to their bodies intuitively.
Mm. Okay, so in your cookbook writing, these were still restrictive diets that you were writing
Yes.
about. Okay.
Yes.
And you said your particular choice at the time was still paleo.
Yes.
So
Yes.
how did you get out of that pattern, so to speak?
Um, I think a lot of science and research helped. I still believe, like, I am celiac, so the house is still gluten free, and I still very strongly believe that all of the kids have gluten sensitivities as
Mhm.
well. And I just point out to them, like, one of my sons has eczema and it flares often when he overdoes things.
Yep,
And so I'll say to him, like, what have you been doing in your life? Are you stressed? Right? It's not always about food. Like, there are different things that can affect autoimmune conditions or eczema, different kinds of things. And so, I'll be like, are you stressed? And when he says no, I'm like, what else could have done it? And he just like looks at me side eye. He's like,
right.
yeah, he works at a bagel shop. And so he has access to a
Wow.
lot of gluten. Yeah. And so he's
Yeah,
like, I know, I know. I'm like, okay. But you know what? When I was in my late teens and early 20s, I wasn't making the best choices based on what
of
was healthy or
course.
not. And so I try to just remember that and know that as long as he can put two and two together, he will eventually figure out what's best for him.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so I think just learning also that there have been a lot of scientific studies done now that paleo was around for so long, like let's say 15 years is when I think they started doing some of the studies on
Mhm.
it, that they realized that the gut microbiome was dying off from how limited the dietary breadth was, right? Like if we're eliminating all legumes, if we're eliminating, for me, I also was autoimmune paleo, so I didn't do any nightshades, which is, quite a number of vegetables.
Mhm.
There was a period where I was avoiding cruciferous vegetables because I have thyroid issues. And so,
It's so
like,
restrictive. It's
my
like,
diet,
yeah.
yeah, my diet was like six options. I remember sitting in a 7-Eleven parking lot because I was so hungry and sobbing because I couldn't have eggs, I couldn't have nuts, I couldn't have
Mm.
spices, I couldn't, and just being like, what can I eat? That wasn't healthy. Like, that was stressing my body in way more ways than a hard-boiled egg would have done.
Right.
So learning those kinds of things from the outside after a little bit of time and science helps have the safety to like, I don't know how else to describe it except I had to feel safe in my body to say I'm going to eat this thing, and it in and of itself is not harmful. Like, I am safe, my body is safe, and just having those conversations as I reintroduced foods. And there are still some foods where I'm like, nope, I can't overdo it with nightshades. Like, I'm Hungarian and Italian, so telling me to get rid of peppers and tomatoes,
Yeah.
traumatic,
Yeah, for
right? And so
sure.
being able to have them back even just a little bit is a quality of life change that has a much larger positive impact that removing them entirely from my body could have done. So just kind of also learning that we are all very different and that there is no one size fits all. And I think that's what we're all looking for, is like, just give me the box to exist in, give me the rules, give me the whatever, because that feels safe and easy. But the fact is that every single person is completely unique. Our microbiome is unique. Our genetics are unique. Like, there's just so many things that go into helping you feel your best. And how you felt in your 20s is going to feel very different than how you feel in your 40s. What your needs are very different. So, if we live in this like small box of rules, we're not setting ourselves up for success.
Mm.
And I had to learn all of that in order to be able to let go of the dogma and the strict rules and all that kind of stuff.
Mm. And what about your exercise? Because you said you're very athletic and you go for strength. It sounds like you go for strength over, the diet piece of the
Yeah,
exercising. So
yeah.
how did you find something you love to do exercise wise?
So I was a competitive strongman. I for people who don't know what that is, strongman is the sport where you see like the really big guys pick up like the boulders and move them. I was strongest woman in Virginia for 2 years. Like
Wow.
I loved strongman until I had a debilitating back injury, which stupidly was a garden incident. And there was like a guy who was like, "Oh, let me get that for you," in like a mocking way. And of course, I was like, "I'm gonna pick up this bag of concrete all by myself." And it anyway. Um,
Mm. I'm sorry.
yes. So I did PT and moved into water aerobics. It took me a long time to accept the loss of my community, like no longer being able to lift strong and the identity that I had that was associated with being strong um, was very, very hard to let go of. And then moving into something like water aerobics, which could not be any more
More
of polar opposite,
opposite.
but it's what my body needed, right? And so I had to kind of let go of, as you know, this conversation goes, the dogma and the beliefs that I had that like that was the one identity that was associated with me. And I had to do the things that felt good in my body at the time. I am now back at a gym regularly. I love when my kids, I have two boys that'll work out and lift with me.
Mm.
And the youngest one is so cute. Like he'll go on and do something first, whether we're deadlifting or whether we're using a machine, and then he'll be like, "How much do you want me to add?" Like he knows that, and he's 6'2". Like
Wow.
yeah, he's not a small guy, but he has so much respect for my strength. Like that just makes my heart explode. And then my other one just wants to like be on the treadmill, and I'll be on the treadmill with him and just, like whatever it is. But I think just learning to find physical activities that work for you. The other physical activity that I do that most people don't associate with exercise is I'm a potter. And
Mm.
so I lift heavy bags of clay. There's a lot of core work that goes into centering yourself at the wheel and not like moving with the momentum of it,
Hmm.
and those kinds of things. And so almost every single day I'm sweating. And I think we all need to find ways to move our bodies that are not necessarily like a prescriptive way that someone tells us we should. We have to find the joy in movement, whatever that looks like.
Mm. Beautiful. Tell me about how you came in the fostering path.
My mom was adopted,
Hmm.
and before my husband and I were pregnant with our first child, um, we had said we didn't want to be parents, which I know you've said I have 4 children.
Hmm.
Just stare with me for a minute. We said we were adamant about not having children, and we were going to be the fun aunt and uncle, and we were going to have disposable income and travel the world. And like we had this, you know, beautiful life plan for ourselves.
Hmm. Womp
And
womp.
and turns out that the pull-out method does not work.
Okay,
And
noted.
noted, everybody, write this down.
Yes.
Um, and so we became pregnant with my what is now my first son. And we just felt really strongly like we could give this child a life that we felt passionately about moving, like deciding to do that. We were going to be a family. And it was a conversation to be like, okay, if we're going to do this, like I grew up with divorced parents, single mom. I have step siblings or half siblings and step siblings, but my half siblings didn't live with me. And I was like, it's just really important to me that if we're going to do this, like we are going to do this and be a
Mm.
family. We're going to have more than one kid and we're going to like really commit to each other. And so that's what we did. And we have been to marriage counseling at 3 different points in our 22-year marriage. Um, but deciding to create that family, I think also changed my life from the perspective of then, oh, I need to provide for my family. I need to, we didn't live in like a kid friendly place, just like figuring all these things out. And it definitely had an impact on my career trajectory and really kind of making sure that I was moving up in I was the breadwinner for my family, and my husband was actually a stay-at-home dad. And so just making sure that I was like moving up in my career, setting goals for myself. I'm very like I'm sure you can tell, direct, goal-oriented person. And so all I was actually had a full-time executive career in federal contracting while I
Wow.
was writing cookbooks and raising three small children at the time. So
Wow.
that's just the kind of person I am, that's the overcoming the tragedy. The Enneagram 8 in me is very strong.
I'm an eight as well. I'm an eight
Yeah,
as well. Yep. I am eight wing seven. Are you wing nine or wing seven?
I'm wing nine. I
Okay. I
definitely.
feel like I very rarely find eight wing sevens, but that's what I am. Okay, wait. So you got pregnant with your first one, and at what point were you like, let's also foster?
Oh, sorry, I forgot the
That's
question.
okay.
So we originally had said we weren't going to be parents, but that when we were done doing all of our traveling and everything, that we wanted to foster.
Hmm.
So like that was our plan all along, was that when we were a little bit older, basically the age we are now,
Yeah.
um, that we wanted to give back because my mom, as I mentioned, my mom's adopted, and so that just felt important to me. And also I feel like the world is really hard and there are too many children out there that don't have a loving home, and I wanted to be able to make that a little bit better.
Mm,
So once we had children, the kind of fostering that we wanted to do was for the children who are literally unadoptable. That's what's on their file. And so those are children over the age of 12 who have any sort of issue at all, whether it's autism or trauma. And let me just tell you, or disability, every single 12-year-old plus that's in the foster care system has had trauma. Like the fact that they're in the foster care system in and of
of
itself is
course.
trauma.
Right.
Um, Foster care children have a higher rate of complex PTSD than like active war veterans, and they have so fewer resources than veterans have. So when our children were a little bit older, and at this point I had actually like retired from my corporate job. I was very fortunate to be able to make a career as an entrepreneur. I said to my husband, I was like, we're ready to do this now. Like the children are old enough, because you can't have the foster child be the oldest one in the house. So we had to make sure that we had children who were older than the 12 to 14-year-old child that would be coming into the house. I was like, the children are old enough now. Let's talk about it with them, because my husband was on board. He wanted to do it too. And we had a family meeting, is what we call them. They're not a bad thing. We get together and we talk about things like we plan a vacation, or we, do different things. So we had a family meeting and we talked about whether or not um, the children would be okay with fostering at the time. And the only question they asked was if they could all still have their own rooms.
You're like, priorities, kids,
Yeah,
priorities. Yeah.
yeah. And once they were told that they did not have to share a room, they were like, of course we
Mm,
want to help and, do this. And the awesome thing about fostering is that we are a very privileged family. My children have had every opportunity that could come their way. They are three white males with blue eyes. Like
mhm.
they literally could not have anything else on their platter. Anything they've ever wanted in life, I have ensured happened for them. And so to work with the foster care system was so life changing for our family. I know a lot of people say all the time, like, oh, that child is so lucky to be in your home. And I just want to say, first of all, like, thank you for wanting to be kind. And that's a really harmful statement, because that child is the last person on earth who is lucky. Whatever they have been through, it is horrifying, and
Mm,
none of us would want to go through that circumstance, whether they loved their parents and were ripped from their arms for circumstances beyond their control, like maybe their parents lost their job and couldn't afford their home, or it's because their parents were neglectful or abusive. Either way, they have experienced like incredibly harmful tragedy. And we also, just navigating the system in and of itself, learning. So, for example, when you're a foster parent, we had to learn the Medicaid system, and we started seeing different doctors or different therapists that Medicaid would accept, which is different than the doctors that our insurance would accept, and seeing the difference of quality of care. I like, my child's non-binary, and their therapists would not respect their pronouns. And
Ugh.
that was like the assigned provider for them, right? And so learning all of those things has made a huge difference in my boys being able to understand and have compassion for more people in the world, to kind of go beyond their bubble and understand. I mentioned earlier, like having empathy and having compassion and doing so in a way outside of what serves them best, like being able to think, how does this impact other people? And for me, that's a really important value that I want to instill in my children. And so I feel so fortunate that we were able to be foster parents. We fostered three other children before our current child came into our home, circumstances I won't get into. Um, just one day called my husband and was like, this child absolutely will not be leaving our home. Like their biological family said, we don't want you,
Mm,
which I can't imagine anything more harmful. And the minute that I heard that, I was like, this child will be staying here. We
mm,
want them. Like,
mm.
that's it, period. End of story. So we didn't go into it to adopt, but we're so grateful that the universe put us together with that child who is now an adult who graduated high school. We're so proud of them,
Oh my gosh.
and is living the best life that we could possibly imagine for them. And my biological children are their siblings. Like this is our family. We are all one big family, and some have been here longer than others. And oftentimes we talk about, like, someone's childhood story or something like that. And we're like, tell us yours. Like, do you know what your first words were? Do those kinds of things?
Mhm.
And just trying to make it as normalized as possible, because I think if more families were open to the idea that they could love a child that wasn't their flesh and blood as much as they love the children that are their flesh and blood, like, it's different. Yes, no one is going to disagree with you that it's different. Even the child will tell you they have different love for us than they have for their biological family. And that's okay. Like, we can all exist and it can be different. And as long as we are open about these things, like, it can be life changing in a wonderful way. And the last thing I'll say on this before you ask me a different question is, I live in the state of Virginia. It's the second worst state in the country for foster care. And I encourage everyone to kind of look into their own system. There's a lot of different ways that you can volunteer. You can be a child advocate. You don't have to bring the child into your own home. Like, there's a lot of different things you can do. But in my state, there are children who are in foster care who have done absolutely nothing wrong, who are literally living in detention centers because that is the only place for them. And so I challenge anyone who's ever felt it in their heart that they might be able to provide a little extra love for somebody, to investigate what they might be able to do, whether it's like take kids on outings during the day, which is called respite, whether it's being a child advocate, all of those things. Like, I think that there is such opportunity for people to, especially in today's day and age when it feels hopeless, like whatever you might be feeling or experiencing, if you could have a connection with someone else in the community and know that you are making a difference in someone's life, and you can look at their face and know that, like, you are helping each other, it is the most powerful thing I think that we can do.
I mean, I didn't know you could do something called respite. I'm literally going to look into it in Cal. I mean, it's in California, so we have like very different than Virginia, but
No, they
what
still
a
do respite in California. I
yeah,
have friends who,
great.
yeah.
I didn't know you could do that. I would love to do something like that. And I feel like that is the perfect place to wrap up, because what I love about you is, like, yes, you have a clean lifestyle, but it's really so much more about a clean heart than a clean skincare regimen. I mean,
Yeah.
it's all of it, but it's
Yeah.
just what a beautiful way to pull it all together. Tell everybody, we will link out, of course, to all of your stuff, but you have your current podcast is called
Whole life, real talk.
Whole
And
Life Real Talk.
you can also just find everything at realeverything.com.
Yeah.
So, social media, podcast. I also, as you mentioned, partner with Clean Living Company for inside and out, whether it's skincare, protein. And I sell my pottery and non-toxic clean candles in the pottery. All of that is linked on my website, realeverything.com.
Ooh, I can't wait to check it out. Stacey, thank you so much. We were actually set up on like a blind podcast date by our
Yeah.
podcast network, and I'm just so grateful that they did because I think you're wonderful.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. And listeners, if you're still here, thanks for sticking it through.
Yeah, I hope they'll be here. I know they'll be here.